Welcome to the Tech Life podcast. In this very first episode, I was lucky enough to sit down with Steve Buchanan, who works in the Azure field, and got a chance to see how his job change into Microsoft is going, what tech he's currently working with, and how he handles learning, keeping on top of things, and what he does outside of work. I hope you enjoy, and don't forget to subscribe, turn on your notifications for upcoming episodes, and drop a like or comment. Steve, nice to finally get some time with you. Been a little bit chaotic in the first couple of days of MMS. Do you want to just introduce yourself and generally what it is that you're now doing as a role? Because you've moved on from the days when I knew you as just another MVP.
Yeah. Nice to see you again, Steve. So I'm with Microsoft now.
Right.
And prior to Microsoft, I was with Avanade, which is owned by Microsoft and Accenture.
Oh, now that I did not know.
Yeah. So I was focused on Fortune 500 companies.
Yep.
And so I was leading a cloud transformation group. I was the Azure offering lead, and then Midwest in the United States, container services lead.
Okay.
So I was doing a lot of work, with Azure migrations, SAP on Azure, just general Azure stuff, and then Kubernetes. So Azure Kubernetes service, like projects on that. So helping organizations put in like landing zones for Kubernetes.
Okay.
Specifically like AKS.
Yeah, so Kubernetes and all that side of it is really getting outside of my comfort zone. So obviously I spend a lot of time within the general Azure field, but mainly that whole traditional type of infrastructure moves. I recognize the term landing zone concepts because that's do you want to explain landing zones in a bit more detail?
Yeah, so Cloud Adoption Framework is a framework built by Microsoft. And within there you have landing zones. And think of a landing zone as like before you put stuff in Azure, you need somewhere for it to land, right?
Okay, yeah. Makes sense with the name.
So then we get into like our architecture that we need within a landing zone. So we might need hub and spoke, right? That's pretty common architecture from a network standpoint. And then figuring out what goes in that hub and what's going to go in those spokes, those sort of things, right? So, you need networking, that's like core. You need to make sure your security is taken care of. You might need things like DNS servers or domain controllers, right? We might put those things in the hub.
So these are like the best practice recommendations that Microsoft say. It'd be good if you did this, twiddled that.
Yes.
That's the best way to set it up, and it's that architecture that gives you that blueprint, if I'm understanding this right.
Yes.
That you can then lay your services on top of.
Yes, not to be confused with the service blueprints, right?
Throwing a few more mechanisms there. So obviously the Kubernetes stuff, that, like I say, I don't deal with that stuff in the slightest. So what type of scenarios does that bring in for general customers and so on?
Yeah, so if anyone's running containers in your organization, if you get, to a sizable amount of containers that you need to run, and or you're running containers in production, chances are you're going to need something like Kubernetes. Kubernetes does the full orchestration of your containers, right? So spinning them up, spinning them down, moving them from node A to node B, and et cetera, right? Kubernetes automates all of that for you. So if you're an organization that has thousands of containers, let's say, and or critical production workloads or even dev workloads, and you need orchestration around those, that's where Kubernetes comes into play. Now, Microsoft has a managed Kubernetes service called AKS. Well, actually, it's called Azure Kubernetes Service. The acronym is AKS.
Let's stick with AKS. Yeah. Slightly simpler to remember.
I always use AKS. So what Microsoft has done there is they've simplified Kubernetes to a point, right? So you can go spin up a new Kubernetes cluster. You're not deploying it manually and going through all the pain that comes with that. You're not having to manage the nodes that are in the control plane. And Microsoft's done some other things too, like made it so you can easily see stuff in you could see Kubernetes like components or workloads in the Azure portal. Or you could hook it up to things like Azure Monitor, which I know you're familiar with.
That I am.
Right? And so you could use Azure Monitor to monitor your Kubernetes cluster and also the workloads that are running in your Kubernetes cluster.
Right, so you have that automation, orchestration, control plane with AKS.
Yes.
And then have the ability to actually then use the other Azure services to see what's going in with it, health, performance, all the rest.
Yeah, and you can use other things that you and a lot of folks at MMS are used to, like Azure Policy.
Yes.
Right? You can use Azure Policy to manage your Kubernetes clusters, but also you can apply policies to the containerized workloads inside the clusters. And now you can start to manage fleets of clusters. Now we're getting way out there, right? But
Proper big scale side of things.
And there's more stuff coming to AKS all the time. But if someone wants to get started with Kubernetes, AKS is a good way to do it. Because if you have experience with Azure, you can go out to the Azure portal, deploy a cluster, and certain things are going to be familiar to you. Some things are going to be foreign, but certain things are going to be familiar. This is kind of a good way to get started.
Okay.
Yeah.
Talking of MMS, so we're back. We're finally here in person
Finally
at
back.
an event.
Yeah.
It's been a little bit of a long time coming with the way the world turned out of recent time. What's probably been one of the things you've been most looking forward to getting back in front of the community and mixing with individuals?
Well, my favorite thing so far has been just reconnecting with people in person and reconnecting with friends.
So it's been quite some time, hasn't
Yeah,
it?
folks like yourself, folks like Cameron Fuller, John Joyner, Brian Mason, and the list goes on, right? So many people, but there's still so many people that are missing. So it's kind of sad from that perspective.
Yeah.
Not missing because of bad stuff, but missing because they just aren't here at the
Missing
conference.
but not forgotten.
Yeah. But that's been I think the biggest benefit is networking and meeting new people, and just the information here is amazing. And also I'm presenting a session and I'm on a couple of panels.
Yes.
And so just here back in person sharing some of the knowledge that I have, right? And being at Microsoft, well, like always as an MVP, we were under NDA.
Yeah.
So there was things we couldn't share then. Now there's even more that I can't share, but there are things that I can share. And so those things, I'm here to share that knowledge and just like connect with the community and customers and stuff.
That's an interesting point, that. So obviously being an MVP, you get a little bit of information drip fed to you and told not to tell anyone.
Right.
And as an ex-MVP, it was always difficult because you're like, it's cool, I want to show what's coming.
I feel that even more now. It's like,
well, that's good. That was going to be my question. Obviously, I'm not going to get you to tell me anything that you can't tell me.
I won't.
But for that kind of internal development process, can you now kind of start to appreciate what does go on behind the scenes and how far are Microsoft thinking ahead of the ideas that might not come to fruition? And does it give you a bit more of a understanding now of where they were able to tell us stuff, how important was it for them to be able to show some stuff but keep some stuff behind, if that makes sense?
It does make sense. So like now I'm seeing I'm seeing it from the other side of the fence,
Yeah.
right? And so it does help me have a better understanding of what goes into the planning and all of the moving parts. With an organization the size of Microsoft, you can imagine,
Yeah.
right? To be able to move at the speed that they have been, or that we have been,
Yeah.
with Azure, with things like O365, with stuff in Azure like Sentinel and Azure Arc and all these things that are being innovated on so fast. There's a lot of planning and a lot of moving parts and teams and people that have to come together, right, to make that happen in a way where there's good quality products coming out of that. So it's just unbelievable. And as far as the MVPs, I can definitely see, being kind of being a group that's on the outside, but on a outer inner ring, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And being able to feed bits of information. It's important because MVPs are working with customers but also very strong in the community and very well connected at conferences like this, for example.
Yeah.
So being able to feed those bits and get that feedback back early on without releasing it to everyone, so that adjustments can be made along the way, right?
That's the thing. It's not just Microsoft being mean, for want of a better words, and
No.
holding on to information. I get that feeling it is pretty much about that internal validation, about giving the best product that they can, so getting early door feedback,
Right.
not releasing too much at once so they can work on it until it's released, or am I just putting words in Microsoft's mouth there?
No, that sounds pretty good. That's pretty close, and that's a good way to describe it and summarize it.
So obviously you've made that transition from, I can never say the name,
Avanade.
Thank you. So from outside of Microsoft and as an MVP into Microsoft. Now obviously any sort of job change comes with changes with working styles and all the rest of it. How do you personally both adapt to the changing situations, like changing job roles, as well as, on a personal note, because we're in a tech field, which means the constant learning, how do you keep up with that as well? So 2 questions in one. How do you cope with change when it comes to moving jobs? And then how do you cope with change within the tech field and learning?
So as far as change in the tech field and learning, like I'm a natural learner, or naturally curious, right? So I always want to learn stuff. And so tech is a great field for me because there's always something to learn.
Yep.
And so in my spare time, I'm either reading blogs or I'm on Twitter, like checking hashtags, right? So I'll do like hashtag Azure, search on that, see what's out there, and if there's anything I'm missing, or hashtag GitOps or Kubernetes or whatever.
Yeah.
So that's one way. I spend time at user groups, talking with folks like yourself. I'm at conferences like this, so I'm learning things that way. And then as an MVP, one of the best benefits, I'd argue probably the second biggest benefit, was having that Azure credit.
Right.
And so if I was curious about something like, oh, what's this API management gateway thing? Let me go spin it up and see if I can break it, see if I can deploy it, see if I can, what it does, and if I can hook it up to, this thing, or deploy an app, right, to Azure App Service in a new, different way, or, explore things that way. And so that's another way that I continue to learn. Like, if I read about something, like, oh, I never heard of that, let me go get my hands on that technology and start to explore it early.
I do like that little bit that you put there. It's like, let me see how I can break it.
Yeah.
I tend to find personally myself, I learn a lot more with breaking something and understanding what caused it to break and how to fix it, than just going, oh yeah, I clicked 5 buttons and it works.
Just don't do that in production.
Yeah, I'm not going to get what my nickname is usually when it comes to testing in production.
I know that happens out there.
Just a bit.
Whether people admit it or not. So as far as like the job change and adjusting there, there's always change. There's always adjustments that need to happen, different cultures, things like that. You kind of find your place. Coming from Avanade and Accenture, where I was living and breathing Microsoft technologies and Azure specifically, and then the open source stuff with Kubernetes and like Linux and containers. Coming over here to Microsoft, it wasn't that big of a shift from that perspective. All the technologies that I was working with day to day on the job, in the community, whether I'm writing books, developing Pluralsight courses, I'm still doing those things. But I'm on the inside, seeing things a lot earlier and being able to help shape the product now. It's amazing. And as far as the culture, like coming from Avanade and Accenture, massive organization, right? So 50,000 plus employees at Avanade, 400,000 plus employees at Accenture, very large organization. Microsoft, large org. There's a lot of similarities.
Yeah.
So actually that helped that transition as well.
Okay.
So
In your day-to-day, obviously lots of different people's work patterns vary. Some people could just be in meetings all the time. Some people just have single projects to go run. In terms of your approach to how you have to organise yourself within a work environment, what type of things do you find yourself either doing that you don't really think about, that just kind of come naturally, versus stuff that you have to make yourself do in order to keep on top of your workload?
Great question. So I'll start with it's a work in progress.
Okay.
I'm agile in that manner, right? No pun intended there, but I'm always changing the way I work and how I organize myself to become more efficient.
Right.
Sometimes I'm not efficient and then I have to adjust and get better. But I'm the type of person where like I can't operate in chaos or be productive in chaos. So like if you saw my desk in my home office, it's usually pretty clean and pretty organized. If it gets messy or crazy, then I have to clean it up before I can start working.
I've just got a vision now of every single pen lined up neatly and matching at the top and bottom.
It's not quite to
Not
that
quite
point,
that point.
but like there's certain things I like on my desk, and then if there's a pile of other stuff on there, I gotta move it, right? I gotta put things away. And I like my computer kind of the same way.
Okay.
And then I use OneNote all the time. I like to use to-do lists. So I actually picked up this habit that I'm going to describe out of being forced to do it, and then eventually it just became. Yep. But I had a job a long time ago where you had to track everything you did all day in 15-minute increments and then enter it into a horrible database.
Okay.
Not Access, it was like something else, right? We had to enter it into this thing, and then that became our time card. Well, if we didn't have our entries in before payroll's processed, you wouldn't get paid. So it was serious business, right? So I got into the habit of like, I would open Notepad, and I would track what I do every day. I don't do that anymore. But I developed a habit out of that of creating to-do lists.
Oh, okay.
And I developed a template for myself in OneNote where I'll copy it out like every day. Sometimes I forget, right?
Yeah.
And then I put in there what I plan to do. And then I will track like what I've done that day. If there are big items that I might need to reference or something. I don't have anyone like not gonna pay me if I don't enter my time or things like that. But being in that world of consulting, you learn to kind of track what you're doing, and then having a to-do list for me is important because if I have meetings or if someone sends me a message on Teams, or when we were in the office, if someone came over to the cube or what have you, you'd get distracted from your work. Having a to-do list would help you get back on track, like, oh, this is what I need to really get done today.
Yeah.
And so
that makes a lot of sense.
That's a little bit of insight.
I'll start something, get interrupted, totally forget what I'm doing.
Oh, yeah.
2 days later, I go, oh, I didn't finish what I was doing. So, yeah, I can absolutely see the value of that. So you've got that almost like an interruption break list so you can keep yourself back on track again. And that's a good tip, actually, rather than doing it to plan out what you maybe necessarily going to approach to do, but more as a reminder of what tasks have you accomplished if there's stuff to pick
And
up.
as you check them off, it just like feels good, right? It's you could compare it to like getting likes on social media, if you will. Like, oh, I accomplished this, right? You break things down into smaller tasks, and then as you accomplish them, you check them off. And in OneNote, you can create a list, bullet points, but then you can actually put to-do check boxes on them. So you literally can like check it, check the next thing, like yeah, it's really helpful.
That's actually a really good point, because I was thinking about this the other day. Personally, I have been through days, sometimes even multiple days, where I just feel like I've literally accomplished nothing.
Me too.
And I'm sure that there is stuff behind the scenes that has been accomplished, and people tell me that, yes, you forgot about this, forgot about that. And that sort of, as you just mentioned, that tick box and that feeling of satisfaction that you have achieved something must go a long way to keeping not self-esteem, but that feeling of accomplishment.
It does.
In terms of that generally for yourself, what type of things generally, and maybe not even just directly related to tech and stuff, do give you that warm, fuzzy feeling of accomplishment? What drives you onto the next thing?
I'd say two things: goals, having goals, and curiosity.
Okay.
Right? So the goals, having goals, and I don't like to set like year-end goals. Like some people set goals on New Year's Eve or whatever for the year, right?
Yeah.
I don't like to do that. Also, I might leave this interview and set a new goal. And then like I'm immediately working towards that goal.
Yeah.
Right? So it's just
Goal. Remove Steve from all contacts.
Yeah, there you go. But it helps me stay motivated and kind of work towards things.
Yeah.
And then I say curiosity because the curiosity drives new goals, right? So Steve wants to accomplish this because I want to see if I can do that, accomplish that thing. So now that curiosity of being able to accomplish that thing or explore something new becomes a goal. And then I start to work towards that. And then I'll have a goal and I'll just break it down, because a lot of times goals they can be monumental, right?
Yeah.
And if you just try to chew that off, it's like, then you get discouraged. It's like, man, I'm not going to reach that. This sucks. I suck.
That's really important, because as you say, set yourself a goal, but don't make it unrealistic.
Right.
Like you say, if you can never actually get there, or you're finding there's too much work between the stages of getting there, you are just going to become disheartened and you're going to give up.
Right.
Like I say, I think that bit that you just mentioned, that splitting it down into the sub goals, that is such a key tip for anyone. Don't want to use the acronym of don't try to boil the ocean, but it's absolutely true, isn't it?
It is.
Do stuff which is achievable and gives you that sense of achievement throughout it to achieve something bigger.
Yes.
Now, obviously with your curiosity, what outside of the tech world drives you and keeps you sane when you're not working?
Well, something that keeps me sane and drives me insane.
Right. Interesting.
My kids.
Okay. I can relate to that one, absolutely.
So they're like huge part of my goals, right? I want to accomplish things so I can provide for them, so I could provide for their future, and as I learn things, I teach them.
Nice.
And so that keeps me sane, and just having my kids and seeing them happy and doing stuff with them keeps me sane.
Right.
Also, when they're not listening and like not turning off the lights in the house, right, when they're not in a room or, whatever, that stuff can drive you insane.
Absolutely.
So, it's both ends there.
Yeah.
But other things outside of tech, I like martial arts.
Okay.
So I haven't done it for a while. I did Kung Fu, Wushu actually, for about 6 years. I did it with two of my boys, and we reached black belt. But we haven't done it for
See, that's goals there.
years. But I'd love to free up some of my time and pick up Wing Chun Kung Fu.
Okay.
I did that for a little while, and it's really good. Plus, I think it's good exercise and just, helps keep you fresh and young. And so I like that. I like exercising. I've been getting into running a little bit. I could improve a lot there.
So, have you actually done any while you've been here this week?
No.
No.
So,
just called you out on that one straight away.
Consistency, right?
Yeah.
Consistency, and that's a reminder. Like, that should be one of the daily goals. Like, get out there and do 3 miles or whatever.
Yeah.
But that's a good example. Like, okay, pick a race, sign up for the race. That's the big goal. A sub goal would be like consistently running up until the race, so you're not dying in the race, right?
Absolutely. I've done a very similar thing. I've got a race in October.
Oh, okay.
It's far enough away that I know, right, I need to start training now, otherwise I'm going to be dead by that point.
So
yes,
have you run
long term
this week?
Not this. No, I've been swimming.
Oh, okay. Oh, well, okay. There you
Close
go.
enough on
yeah,
that point.
there you go.
I've done one run, and
Oh.
that's it. Not this week, in the last month. So all as bad as each other on that one.
So yeah, I have a lot of interest outside of tech, and actually tech outside of work is one of my interests.
Okay.
So a lot of people will say, put down the tech and go do something else.
Yeah.
Well, I actually find it refreshing when you have something you want to explore, or maybe you want to build something, or just find out about some new tech, to do it outside of work. It's different, right? You are exploring that tech for yourself, for other reasons. You're curious, you want to figure out how it works. It's not work, and it doesn't feel like work. So it's enjoyable, actually.
That's something I've heard a couple of times. It's that idea that it doesn't have to be just a job. If there's a passion there and you enjoy it, you can also make it a hobby without it being just a bleed over of work.
Right.
Do you agree on that side? Or?
100%. And you can have an added benefit that it can benefit your work. It can make you better at work, but you don't have to do it because of work.
Yes.
It could be a self-driving thing of like honestly, when I started with Kubernetes and containers, I did it on my own. I actually had a job at one point where I told them I wanted to move into that space, DevOps, containers, Kubernetes. It's like, this is the new thing, it's hot. They didn't support me. And so I still had interest, and I started working on it on my own. Because it was like, wow, you can spin up a server essentially in seconds and run an app on it, instead of like booting up this VM, waiting for, logging in, like
the IT pro life of, I'll just watch a progress bar for 20 minutes.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm like, there's got to be a better way, and maybe containers are the way. And there's better ways than containers even, I believe. But so I started working with containers and Kubernetes on my own before I even did it at work. And because of exploring that on my own, it led to the opportunities for me to start doing it at work and being skilled up and ready to do it. So.
Steve, it's been absolutely a pleasure both being able to catch up with you again at the personal level, at the event level, everything. So I appreciate you taking this time to just sit down and talk to us and get a little bit more of an insight on both what you've been up to, what you're doing now, and just how you generally relate and react within this tech madness life that we all tend to live. But brilliant, it's been a pleasure.
Thanks, Steve.
Enjoy the rest of the conference, and we'll
Thanks.
grab a beer very shortly.
You too. Thanks.
Cheers. In the next episode, we'll be speaking to Arya Kali from Microsoft about all things Windows updates and what makes her tick. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, hit like, and drop a comment if you want to see more of this type of content.